And time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France. For a long time, France has been very proud of a so-called French exception, its strong fertility rate. France has been the baby-making champion of Europe for years, but the country is experiencing a kind of baby blues recently, with the number of births dropping over the past few years. French Connections host Florence Villeminot is here to break it all down for us.
Hey, Charlie. Yeah, according to France's National Statistics Bureau, the INSEE, 723,000 babies were born in 2022. So sounds like a lot of babies, but it's actually 19,000 fewer babies than in 2021. And people are actually concerned by the 2022 birth rate. It's the lowest since 1946, so right after the Second World War. It's such a historic drop that some people are saying that France is in the middle of a baby bust.
So what's behind this baby bust that has France so worried?
Well, it is a common trend that we're seeing in a lot of industrialized nations. Demographers say that it's due to several reasons, but basically there are the number of women in age of having children is dropping, and they're having fewer babies. Why is that? Well, here again, there are several factors. Society is evolving. Basically, there's less pressure to push out the babies, and it's less taboo to just not have children at all. But there's also a lot of other factors. For instance, the rising cost of living and especially uncertainty about the future, whether it's fears of economic hardship ahead or the negative effects of climate change, for instance. All this means that people are aren't having kids at all, or they're choosing to have fewer kids.
C'est aussi pour avoir un peu, continuer à avoir du temps pour nous, nos occupations, nos loisirs.
C'est vrai qu'on a nos carrières aussi respectives, et donc Anna est indépendante, moi je suis salarié dans une grande entreprise. Et un enfant pour nous faisait vraiment sens pour vraiment s'en occuper pleinement.
La conjoncture économique, elle joue un rôle très très important. Avoir des enfants, c'est bien, mais bien les éduquer et leur assurer un avenir adéquat, c'est beaucoup plus important.
Of course, a drop in the fertility rate is a concern for the government because there can be real consequences for society, economics.
Absolutely, and it's interesting that this drop comes right as the government is pushing through a controversial overhaul of France's pension system. Now, the government argues that the system is unsustainable because of an aging population combined with a shrinking workforce. And it's true that a lot of France's generous social protection program depends on redistribution. And so if there are fewer babies, well, there'll be fewer workers to pay for the system, unless, of course, we accept more immigrants. But, of course, that is another very controversial debate. Now, on top of all these big societal consequences, there can be very local consequences as well. For instance, some public schools have decided to axe classrooms altogether due to a drop in the number of students, drawing real anger from parents.
On nous promet pour l'année prochaine, avec une fermeture de classe et une réaugmentation assez sensible des effectifs.
Nous, ce qu'on demande, c'est de profiter de cette baisse démographique pour proposer un meilleur encadrement et un meilleur suivi des élèves.
All this being said, though, Flo, the situation isn't as catastrophic as in some other countries, including in Europe.
Absolutely. And it's funny because, French people have the reputation of being very pessimistic in general. But in one major way, they're very optimistic and confident about the future. And you can see it in the number of babies. Now, even though the number of babies is dropping, France is still Europe's baby-making champion, if we can put it that way. It still has the highest baby-making rate. So these are the latest statistics from 2020. And you can see France has, French women make 1.83 babies per woman. It's higher than in Germany, much higher than in Italy, which is a real cause of concern for Italy. And it's higher than the EU average. Now, that being said, this baby-making rate per woman is still lower than what they call the replacement fertility rate, so that the population keeps growing. That's considered to be 2.1 children per woman. That being said, demographers say there's no cause of alarm here in France, unlike what you were saying, Italy, Spain here in Europe, but in other countries as well, Japan and China in Asia, they're facing an alarming decline in birth rates. And this is really prompting a lot of concern about the long-term economic and social consequences for the populations there. So for now, things are okay here in France.
So it's not as if French women have some sort of baby-making superpowers or are more fertile than women anywhere else. All that cheese is not
And the wine.
somehow making more babies. So it's really more the generous welfare programs and incentives to have babies, something I've experienced in the past couple of years, having 2 kids in 2 years myself. And it really does help.
It certainly does. It does encourage women to have more babies, families to have more babies. It's our expression du jour is this generous system that was actually put in place in the 1930s to boost the birth rate. So the state set up this family allowance system backed by tax incentives. It's known as les allocations familiales here in France, and you start receiving them on the birth of your second child, and it goes up the more children you have. But it's not just the tax breaks and the cash handouts. France's baby boom secret is actually getting women to go back to work. And here again, there are all sorts of subsidized childcare options to help women get back into the workforce, because it might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but studies show that the more women are actually active in the workforce, well, the more babies they have. And the more babies they have means that they'll have more future workers and taxpayers, and all this will fund France's very generous welfare system.
Mm-hmm. Definitely the crèche system, the daycare system makes a huge difference for working moms, and something that in the U.S. we could probably use something similar. That's all of this edition of French Connections, but you can tweet your questions to Flo. She's at Flo Vizmino, and check out more episodes on our website at france24.com.